The rain had been falling for 3 days without rest, turning the refugee plain into a sea of mud and broken hopes. At the far edge of the camp, a thin alien mother sat inside a torn fabric tent, holding her 3 children close. Her skin shimmered faintly blue, dulled by hunger and exhaustion. The tent barely stood, supported by bent metal rods and hope alone. Water dripped through the seams, soaking the ground where the children tried to sleep. Her name was Sayalira, once a teacher on her distant world. War had taken her home, her partner, and everything familiar. All that remained were her children, small, fragile lives who depended on her strength even when she felt none left. She used her own body as a shield, wrapping her arms around them whenever the cold wind cut through the night. Nearby, humans moved through the camp, distributing rations and checking medical scanners. Many had passed Sayalira's tent before, offering supplies but never stopping for long. The rules were strict. Temporary shelters were limited. Priority lists were endless. That evening, a human named Daniel walked past with a crate of insulation panels. He was not a soldier, not an officer, just a volunteer who had come after losing his family back on Earth. As he passed the tent, he heard a weak coughing sound, then another. He stopped. Daniel pulled back the torn flap carefully. Inside, 3 small alien children lay shivering, their eyes too large for their thin faces. Sayalira looked up, fear and pride mixing in her expression. She expected judgment or silence. Instead, the human knelt down. He scanned the tent, the wet ground, the way the children pressed together for warmth. His jaw tightened. He stood up and looked toward the rows of prefabricated shelters where lights glowed softly against the dark. Without thinking further, he said quietly but firmly, "Tonight, you will sleep under a roof." Sayalira did not understand the words fully, but she understood the tone. Confusion crossed her face as Daniel returned an hour later with a transport cart. He ignored the protests of a nearby supervisor, loading blankets, heaters, and guiding the family onto the vehicle. As they moved through the camp, eyes followed them, some with anger, some with hope. Daniel stopped at a small, unused supply building near the edge of the human sector. It was not much. Solid walls, a real roof, dry floor. To Sayalira, it felt like a palace. When the door closed behind them, the sound of rain faded. The children slowly relaxed, their bodies finally warming. Sayalira looked at Daniel, her eyes glowing brighter than before. She touched her chest in gratitude, a gesture older than language. Daniel smiled softly, unaware that this single act would echo far beyond the camp, into worlds that still believed humans incapable of compassion. Morning light filtered through the small window, pale and gentle. Sayalira woke before her children, a habit formed by years of danger. For the first time in many cycles, there was no rain on her face, no cold ground beneath her. The roof above them was solid and unmoving. She placed a hand against the wall, needing to confirm it was real. The children stirred soon after. One by one, they opened their eyes and looked around in silent disbelief. The youngest laughed softly, a sound so rare it made Sayalira's chest ache. They explored the room with careful steps, touching the blankets, the heater, the smooth floor. Safety was new to them, fragile but real. When Daniel returned, he brought warm food and medical supplies. He knelt to their level, explaining slowly, using gestures and translated words from his wrist device. He told Sayalira they could stay for now. He said rules could bend if pushed hard enough. Sayalira listened, her posture straight but tense. She had learned long ago that kindness in wartime was often temporary. Still, she bowed her head deeply, pressing her forehead to the floor in a sign of honor from her people. Daniel quickly asked her to stand, uncomfortable with the display. News spread fast through the camp. By midday, officials arrived. They questioned Daniel, cited regulations, pointed at lists and shortages. He answered calmly, standing between them and the room. He spoke of the children health readings, of unused structures, of the promise humanity claimed to represent among the stars. Others began to gather. A human medic spoke up, then another volunteer, then an alien elder from a nearby sector. Voices rose, not in anger but in agreement. The officials hesitated. Finally, they left with warnings and silence. That night, more tents near Sayalira's old one stood empty. Families had been moved quietly one by one. The camp began to change, not by command, but by example. Days passed. Salira helped where she could, teaching alien children and human ones together using pictures drawn on scrap panels. Daniel repaired shelters, always working until his hands shook with exhaustion. The children followed him like shadows, laughing more each day. One evening, Sailora stood beside Daniel, watching the sun sink behind the camp. She spoke through the translator, her voice steady. On my world, roofs mean more than shelter. They mean belonging. Daniel nodded. He understood more than she knew. Far beyond the camp, reports reached councils and capitals. A small story among countless tragedies, yet it carried weight. Humans, once feared as destroyers, were now spoken of as builders. And it all began with one sentence spoken in the rain. Tonight you will sleep under a roof.